catch me howling at the moon.
What's up, guys, and welcome back to Park Pros. This is Salim Basool, the current president and CEO of Six Flags. Over the past month or so, Salim has become the single most controversial figure in the amusement and leisure industry. People really do not like this guy. So let's rewind a little bit and see how we got here. Salim Basool joined the Six Flags board in February of 2020 and became the chairman of the board a year later in February 2021. In November of 2021, he was named the CEO of Six Flags when he ousted former CEO Mike Spanos. After the chain had just posted a pretty decent bounce back year financially in 2021 following the peak of the pandemic. Fast forward to August 6, 2022. An anonymous poster on Reddit, assumed to be a Six Flags employee, posted an impassioned open letter to Salim pleading that he step down, claiming that morale at Six Flags is at a quote all-time low and that none of the employees have an ounce of respect for him. Around the same time that this was posted, it was revealed that Six Flags had fired about 25% of its full-time employees, including many upper management personnel, like park presidents and department heads that had been at the company for decades. A few days later, Six Flags reported its Q2 earnings, where it missed badly on revenue projections and reported a shocking 22% decline in park attendance compared to the same quarter in 2021, when many of the parks were still not operating at full capacity. These indefensible earnings results led to the stock price dropping a staggering 18%. And on top of all of this, shortly after the earnings call, a Reddit post went viral claiming that Salim made offensive remarks during an internal company call. While there's still no proof that these remarks were actually made, many theme park influencers went ahead and recklessly shared these quotes in a way that indicated that they were actually said during the earnings call, only adding fuel to the anti-Salim fire. These events have resulted in the state of the Six Flags Corporation becoming the #1 hot topic in the amusement industry over the past month, with the overwhelming sentiment among theme park fans being that Salim has got to be ousted as CEO of Six Flags. Until now, I've watched this entire debacle unfold from afar with my mouth shut, because I don't typically like to dip my toes into any controversial topics, especially in a situation where many passionate and talented people in the industry had their livelihoods affected. But on the other hand, I've watched the steady decay of the Six Flags parks over a decade and a half of being a theme park lover, especially at my home park Six Flags Great America, where the state of things now are as bad as they've ever been. I've also seen this almost over-the-top reaction to this whole situation from the hardcore theme park fans that I'm not so sure is completely warranted. And as someone who has a degree in finance and tends to pay a little more attention to the business side of the amusement industry than the average enthusiast, I have some thoughts to share. Ooh, here we go. Let's start first by laying the groundwork for those who may not have a full grasp of the current situation at Six Flags. Salim has rapidly adopted and implemented a new business model for the Six Flags parks, which at a very high level boils down to this. Salim wants to charge people more to get into the parks. Higher ticket prices will lower park attendance, thus creating a better in-park experience, because having less people in the park means less waiting for food and attractions. And by raising this barrier of entry, he believes people will be more willing to spend within the parks. And because attendance is lower, the parks require less employees, which also cuts down costs. Salim also wants to improve the overall quality of the parks by temporarily redirecting all of the chain's capital spending from rides to, quote, park beautification and other in-park initiatives. And he said that adding new rides will not be a priority in the next 2 to 3 years. This is a complete 180 from the Six Flags strategy we've seen in the past, where the chain previously prioritized driving attendance by offering cheap passes and adding a new attraction at every park each year, hoping that more people in the park would equal more overall in-park spending. This long-standing strategy is what developed Six Flags its reputation as the discount chain. So let's break down Salim's strategy into 3 separate, simple steps. Step 1. drastically increase ticket prices. Step 2, see a drop in attendance, which should improve the guest experience with shorter lines. And Step 3, improve the quality of the parks through investments in technology and infrastructure. And on the surface, this plan doesn't seem so bad. I think the majority of both the hardcore and casual theme park goers would agree to pay a little bit extra in return for less lines and a high quality park going experience. The problem is, when you execute these 3 steps in this exact order, which is what Salim Salim has done over the past 9 months, it doesn't really work out that well. Salim decided to drastically raise ticket and pass prices suddenly instead of gradually, saying, quote, "I believe very strongly that ripping off the band-aid all at once is better for our guests than having it every year. Now we're going back and sticking them with another huge price increase." Six Flags 2022 park attendance has taken a nosedive as a result of these price hikes. And although Salim knew this was going to happen, I don't think he would have predicted it'd be a decrease of over 20%. And this is really the primary reason why everyone is so ticked off. When you drastically raise ticket prices while simultaneously saying that no new rides will be added, people aren't gonna be too happy, especially when you pair that with promises of park upgrades that are so far nowhere to be seen. Now, Salim has walked back a little bit on the aggressive pricing, as Six Flags has recently introduced a new annual membership, which is a little bit more reasonable than the season passes they were previously pushing, which were more expensive than a universal pass, but it still is a significant price hike compared to the past. Over the last month, a lot of damage has been done to the chain's reputation. Pair that with the rapid neglect and mismanagement of the park since the pandemic, and there's no denying that the current state of Six Flags is this: high ticket prices, poor attendance, rundown parks, closed rides and areas, disgruntled employees, and no new additions on the horizon. Now, what do I think about all this? I've thought about it a lot. I've watched a lot of videos, read a lot of articles, and have seen a lot of angry people's opinions online. And I think, at the very, very least, I see where Salim is coming from. Now, I realize that this is not a very popular opinion, and before you go leave a hate comment, I hope that you at least hear out the entirety of my argument. I think this is a very bold attempt to completely reframe the company's identity, and with the downright depressing current state of the Six Flags parks, I think it may be a risk worth taking. Let me ask you this: in the past 5 years, would you use any of the following adjectives to describe the average Six Flags park? Beautiful, well taken care of, enjoyable atmosphere, good value. I certainly wouldn't. The Six Flags parks are in bad shape. Between crumbling infrastructure, ads plastered everywhere you go, closed rides and areas, poor landscaping, and I could go on and on about the obnoxious spamming of DC theming, blatant disregard for park history, and so on. Right now, outside of the great roller coasters, these are far from pleasant parks to spend a day at. Like I said, my home park, Six Flags Great America, is in by far the worst shape I've ever seen it in 15 years of going to the park. And I certainly haven't been impressed with any of the other several Six Flags parks I've visited since 2020. With the current state of the Six Flags parks, it would take millions and millions of dollars over the span of years to get them to the level of quality they would need to be at to justify this higher new pricing model. Oh, wait. That's exactly what Salim said he's going to do. Take a look. Over the next couple of years, we expect to invest approximately $130 million in annual capital expenditures, which will prioritize park beautification and other in-park initiatives, food and beverage enhancements, guest-facing technology improvements, and new rides and attractions. I think if you look at what we're introducing still this year, I think we've introduced a lot of rides, even though this has not been our priority going forward, at least for the next 2 years. Okay, so no new rides for the next 2 years. Besides, of course, the delayed attractions like Aquaman, and I'm sure a couple more unannounced ones that had already been purchased before Salim took over. But with $130 million of capital expenditures each year, let's say for the next 2 years, that budget is strictly allocated to developing in-park infrastructure across the chain. And for simplicity's sake, let's say $100 million of that gets distributed equally across the 15 theme parks that Six Flags currently owns or manages, with the other 30 going to the water parks. That would be over $6 million a year per theme park being dedicated to in-park improvements like restaurants, guest-facing technology, and landscaping. Do you realize how much of an impact that could make in elevating the quality of these parks? Here's more from Salim. From more benches to relax on and take a break, to more shaded areas to escape from the hot sun, we moved quickly to upgrade our park infrastructure to respond to our guest feedback. But we are not stopping there. Guest amenities are a top priority for our capital spend over the next few years. If you've watched any of my recent videos, you'll know that this is music to my ears. This is exactly the kind of stuff I want the Six Flags parks to invest in. And amenities as seemingly insignificant as benches or shaded areas have a significant impact impact in improving guest experience at such a small cost. Imagine what $6 million a year per park worth of those improvements would add up to. You can ask anyone in the amusement industry, and they'll tell you that the number one most important revenue stream is in-park guest spending. Getting guests to buy food, merchandise, and upgrades is incredibly important to driving revenue in this industry. And this new Six Flags business model is entirely designed around getting guests to spend more within the parks. Right now, when I go to any Six Flags park, I avoid spending money on food or merchandise or really anything like the plague, because I know that the quality that I'll be getting is so low. And that's just a byproduct of Six Flags spending decades embracing its title as the discount chain. But I never think twice about buying a $10 beer at a SeaWorld park or an $18 meal at Dollywood or Silver Dollar City, because I know the quality and service I'll be receiving in return will be excellent. And also because I feel like the excellent atmospheres of those parks warrants that kind of spending. If you prioritize and cultivate park atmosphere with things like fresh paint, creative landscaping, new and renovated buildings, and other amenities, it will create a higher quality park going experience. And in return, people are going to be more willing to spend money. Look at what Cedar Fair has been doing the last several years. They capitalize on every opportunity possible to renovate old rides and areas with new themes. And in almost every one of those instances, we're seeing new high quality restaurants or beer gardens that provide a more premium guest experience. By doing this, they're killing two birds with one stone, elevating the overall park experience while also driving in-park spending. From what I've gathered, this is exactly what Salim and Six Flags are trying to replicate. And obviously Six Flags has more parks and a lot of catching up to do in the quality department. But with what Salim has promised, it's not out of the question that the Six Flags theme parks will be receiving millions and millions of dollars a year over the next several years that will be put entirely towards cleaning up parks and adding technology and infrastructure that enhances the guest experience. Is that not worth a 2 to 3 year pause on new attractions? Most of the Six Flags parks, at least the major ones that are driving most of the revenue, already have more than enough rides. 13 of the 15 Six Flags parks have 8 or more roller coasters, and over half the parks in the chain have 10 or more. I get why people would be frustrated by a pause on new rides, especially when roller coasters are kind of the one thing that the Six Flags chain has going for it right now. But why can't that come hand in hand with a pleasant park going experience? I don't think that should be an unreasonable ask from us as the consumer, and I think that's exactly what Salim's vision is aiming towards. Now yes, Salim's execution of this vision has so far been, in a word, sloppy. They have really fumbled the rollout of new pricing, and it's completely ridiculous to expect the consumer to pay a premium when you haven't yet provided them any additional value. And I do think that the poor rollout of this new business model has warranted some of the negative response we've seen from consumers. But to be fair, Salim hasn't really had a chance to do anything yet. By the time he took over last November, I'm sure a lot of the 2022 capital expenditure budget was already being allocated on things like Wonder Woman and Dr. Diabolical. And yes, right now in 2022, the Six Flags parks are in pretty bad shape under the watch of Salim. But sometimes you have to take a step back before you can take a step forward. And Salim literally started off the earnings call by saying, 2022 is a transitional year for Six Flags as we reset the foundations of our business model to focus on delivering a premium guest experience. That's where we're at right now. A transitional period between the way Six Flags parks used to be and the way they're going to be in the future. Salim hasn't even had a full year to be CEO, and this upcoming 2022-2023 offseason will be his first real opportunity to take the reins and show us he'll walk the walk on these things he's promising, like park beautification and infrastructure upgrades. I want to shift gears a little bit now and address the major concern that people are having with this Six Flags identity shift, which is that by providing and charging for a more premium experience, Six Flags may become inaccessible to households with less disposable income. And I think this is a very legitimate concern, especially since the company's roots go back to being an affordable regional alternative to Disney. And there was one comment Salim made that caught him a lot of flack. We believe that our demographic is what I call the average income of the US. That's who we are. And I think we are trying to migrate, I'm migrating a little bit from what I call the Kmart, Walmart, to maybe the Target customer. A lot of people were offended by this comment, concluding that Salim is intentionally trying to price lower income people out of the parks, and I guess I can see how they would interpret it that way. But I think Salim was simply making a comparison between two well-known businesses in a different sector during an earnings call, not intentionally disparaging people with a lower income. Salim even clarified his comments later in the call, saying, "Our objective is not to become a park that's not affordable to everyone. So let's make that clear." And when it comes to that Reddit post, do you really think if he actually said these things in a company call, in this day and age, that he would still have a job? But I think a lot of the general overreaction and disparaging of Salim results from a disconnect that exists between theme park fans and the reality of the industry. Six Flags is a business. It's not a public service or charity meant to provide cheap entertainment to you. It is a publicly traded company that exists solely to provide value to its shareholders. As CEO, Salim is legally obliged to act in the best interests of his shareholders. And Salim has been placed in this position for a reason. As CEO of the Middleby Corporation, Salim increased the company's market cap from 40 million to 7 billion, which is an almost unfathomable business achievement. And you can go ahead and argue that he doesn't have the experience to run an amusement park company, but the decision makers on Wall Street, the people who have hundreds of millions of dollars tied to Six Flags stock, they certainly don't see it that way. Even in midst of a disastrous and indefensible Q2 earnings, there's a level of understanding from these investors that Salim has not had a ton of time to execute on this new vision for the chain. And I hate to break it to you guys, but his prior successes are going to give him a very long leash with Wall Street. In fact, just last week, a hedge fund that's been a long-time investor in Six Flags bought 500,000 more shares of Six Flags stock, which is a major vote of confidence in the path that Salim is taking the company. So the reality is, this dude is probably not going anywhere anytime soon. And if you enjoyed the days of Six Flags being the discount chain, where every park got a mediocre new ride every year while infrastructure crumbled and guest experience deteriorated, then I can totally understand why you would be upset with this new business model. But you can't have it both ways. You can't complain that Six Flags parks are run down, have generic theming and mediocre food options, and then throw a fit when someone new comes in and takes the first steps towards changing all of that. And again, I understand that these changes meant many longtime Six Flags employees lost their jobs, and I hate that good, talented people are affected by this. But to achieve actual change, especially in a massive corporation like Six Flags, that's been doing things within relatively the same framework for decades, sometimes you need bold disruption. And I'm not trying to defend Salim or Six Flags or big corporations in general, since I'm sure at least one of you are gonna go there. I'm just a guy who spends a lot of time at theme parks, and I like it when those parks are pleasant places to be. And I especially care about my home park, a place I grew up at and care about, and want to see do better. What I'm saying is I see this as a risk worth taking, especially if the targeted outcome is the Six Flags parks becoming places that provide great thrill rides and an outstanding park atmosphere and guest experience. My point is, it's too early to tell, and it's certainly too early to make this rash of a judgment on Salim. He could very well continue the poor execution of this vision and put Six Flags into a further tailspin, or he could just be positioning the company for a sale, either to another theme park chain or an active management firm. My guess is as good as yours. But if Salim does stick to his word and is able to effectively implement this new vision, then the Six Flags park should be drastically nicer and significantly more enjoyable places 2 years from now. And if he isn't successful, then you will have had every right to get as angry and riled up as you are right now. But we will not know until we give the guy a chance. So my advice to you, if you're an upset theme park fan right now, give it 12 months. Let the new leadership have an off season and a summer season of operation to prove to you that they're serious about elevating the quality of the Six Flags parks. If a year from now, the quality of the parks isn't on par or progressing towards being worth the prices they're charging, then I think it's fair to raise questions. But I think it's worth giving a vision this bold and risky a chance to play out. If by this point you guys still think I'm off base here, please let me know in the comments down below. But that's gonna do it for this monster of a video. Be sure to subscribe if you're new around here, and we'll see you guys next time.